Reader podcast. I'm your host and writer behind 99geek.ca, Andrew Geczy, and this is being recorded on March 28th, 2021. Before I continue, I just wanted to apologize about week one of this royalty. I think was having some issues. Um, I think some people were unable to download it, or everyone was unable to download it. The issue was nothing that I did, and I couldn't have even known that it was going on unless I tried to download it myself. I wish somebody had told me that there was an issue. All I had to do to fix it was just delete it and re-upload it. So it's good now. If you go back, you can finally download week one of royalty. Which is good because this is week 4, so you should probably listen to week 1 first if you can. So yeah. Anyway, my goal in life has always been to write for television, but it's a goal I've had little luck so far in attaining, so instead I've resorted to self-publishing novels on Amazon, but writing the monthly chapters like episodes of TV shows that people can download at patreon.com/99geek. I forgot to set the title for this. Book reading royalty. Week 4. It's probably too late now that I've already started recording it, but I always do that anyway. Where was I? I have no idea where I was. Every chapter is released in 4 parts, a teaser and 3 acts, and every month features a different book spanning both science fiction and fantasy and every genre in between. All I know is the last thing I said was 99geek, I'm pretty sure. All right. That's right. I wrote all the books featured on this podcast, try to make ends meet in what feels like a poverty nightmare. I'm doing all of this alone, living off on unemployment insurance. I don't have a budget. I don't have a team, no editors or producers. I have no backup, no support. I'm completely alone, pro bono, with nothing but my passion for telling stories, and thus I ask you not to judge me or my work or my production values too harshly. I'm doing the best I can, trying to wear all the hats. Tonight you will be reading from Phase 3 of Season 1 of 99% Geek, a chapter of a book entitled Royalty, as I've already spoiled. Remember, you can follow along at patreon.com/99geek. Chapters are somewhat standalone, but at least make sure you start on week 1 for the recap. This is not week 1. But week 1 is finally up to be downloaded, so do it. And listen to that one first, and then week 2 and 3. This is chapter or episode number 1 of book title Royalty, as I've mentioned, entitled Concerning Royalty. And so we continue with week number 4. I see you already made a new friend, Lynn's daughter said as Lynn took long strides down the side of the grassy hill to reach the road on the edge of their farm at the same time as the rest of her family. Lynn's daughter was on her horse, a black and gray stallion, and she was staring down at the fawn Lynn was leading along with a leash. It's not like we were gone that long. Her daughter, Alia, her daughter Allie, sorry, not Alia. Her daughter Allie, it's really early in the morning, leave me alone, had beautiful black skin, dark as the night like her own. Unlike her mother's short hair, however, Allie had let hers grow into a big bushy afro and colored it with streaks of blue and purple. Also, unlike her mother's always large earrings, Allie's only piercing was the subtle plain nose ring. She nodded at her mother and took the leash from Lynn's hand as the warrior woman dropped the heavy weight of the deer onto the road at their feet. I slaughtered its mother, Lynn explained to them, and she pointed at her kill. It's kebabs for dinner. That's dark, Allie muttered, looking across at her brother. Better not get on Mom's bad side or she'll go after your mother. You know, your real one. Allie gave a smirk at her brother, as her brother squirmed on Dermon's horse. Dermon steadied the steed as their son squirmed. Allie, he said, stop teasing your brother. The brown and white mare he was upon had been in her family since before she'd met Dermon. Originally, I used mare to describe Allie's horse, and then it turns out a mare means a woman and a stallion is a male. And I was like, well, Allie's horse was Bill, so presumably it's a male horse. I guess I have to call it the stallion, and this one's the mare. Okay, you learn new things about horses every day, I guess. And that's what they say. Mare. The brown and white mare he was upon had been in her family since before she'd met Dermot. That Bet is the name of the mare, had taken so kindly to Dermot was one of the reasons she dropped her walls. That one of the reasons Lynn. All right, let's try that line again. That Bet had taken so kindly to Dermot was one of the reasons Lynn dropped her walls around him so early on in their relationship. Dermot handed Ronan to Lynn before sliding off the horse himself. Ronan was the spitting image of his father. Same light brown skin, same boyish face, same wild hair, just pint-sized. So, what do you say, Mom? Allie asked, sliding off her horse, Bill, and giving her mom one of her rare smiles. You want to head on down to the creek tomorrow and find some cute little chicks so we can murder their mother in front of them? I didn't mean to, Lynn argued with her daughter. It's okay, Allie said, poking fun. You're just like an accidental monster. Lynn knew Allie didn't care as much for the natural world as Lynn did, and she was just trying to be funny. Lynn looked past her family at what they were dragging behind them. Is this some kind of joke? She asked, nodding at their load. You asked for a plow and he sent you back, She didn't finish her sentence as she wasn't quite sure what she was staring at. Some sort of sculpted rock? Oh, it's supposed to be some sort of sculpted rock slab? The ugliest statue you've ever seen? Dermot asked Lynn from her side. There was something about that statue. As she got close, she could see how it was shaped like a human, though on their knees and seemingly pleading. But that face, there was something familiar about the face. Lynn got in close and really stared into the statue's eyes. And upon recognizing the retinas staring back at her, as afraid as they seemed, Lynn stepped back and raised her hand to her mouth. How? She began to ask. Much do you want to bet he had this coming? Dermot asked, crossing his arms with self-satisfaction. Lynn turned to him with one of her I mean business frowns. Dermot, she spoke her husband's name. Stop finishing my sentences. Yes, dear, Dermot said quickly, shutting up. She stared her brother down, the stone form of a man not so much as swaying in the wind. The stone form of a man, not the stone form of the man. Maybe it makes that better. She stared her brother down, the stone form of the man not so much as swaying in the wind. She reached out to touch him, tracing her fingers down his cheek. There was a pulling on her leg, but at first she ignored it. Mommy, Ronan said, pulling on her leg again. He's been talking to me, Mommy. Told me his favorite food is chocolate and color is blue and he loves butterflies, too. Allie groaned loudly under her breath as she untied her sack from Bill's saddle and carried it up the path to their straw-roofed home. Nobody cares about your stupid imaginary stories, Ronan, she muttered without looking back. Allie, Dermot said her name angrily, but she had already disappeared inside. Lynn patted her son on the head, and he grinned up at her with his goofy, derpy face. She held him close to her leg, and continued to stare down her brother. I have to try and help him, she said at last to her husband. He would do the same for me. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't, Dermot said slowly, shrinking at her glare. Would you rather we leave him like this? Lynn asked. I was thinking he'd look great over there in the garden. Dermot pointed to his vegetable garden beside the barn. Scare away some of the rabbits, you know. Lynn smacked him playfully on the shoulder. I'll head up to his compound on the morrow and try to follow the trail to... let me try that line again. I'll head up to his compound on the morrow and try to follow the trail of whoever did this. With some luck, they'll know how to turn him back. She untied her brother from the horses, and on her own she dragged him from the road onto the yard. She then left him in the middle of the yard and made for their home as Dermot followed along behind her, arguing the whole way. That's ridiculous, he insisted, always against her going on adventures. Of course, it had been a long time now since her last one. You'd only be wasting your time going back there. The trail has gone stone cold. Ali appeared at their doorway before Lynn made it up the path, flipping through pages of a book. He's making a joke, Ali said without looking up. Dad thinks he's being funny again. Lynn stopped in front of the house and turned on her husband with her hands on her hips. What have I told you about that? She poked fun at him. What we really need, Ali said, flipping rapidly through the pages and almost nearing the end of her book, is abalone. Lynn looked at her husband, who seemed as at a loss as she was. She then looked back at her daughter and threw out her arms in confusion. I give up, she said without even trying to guess. What in the royal hells is an abalone? Not in here is what it is, Ali said distractedly, shutting her book and rushing back inside. Lynn chased after her. Their home was like a large cabin with many rooms surrounding a joint kitchen and living space. It was rustic and wooden, with a fire already going in the fireplace. Though it was warmer now in the late afternoon, it had been colder in the morning when she had set the flame. She didn't much mind the heat, but Lynn hated feeling cold. Allison made straight for her room, and through the doorway Lynn could see her daughter scrounge through her bookcase overflowing with books. Ali, Lynn repeated her daughter's name. Ali, you gotta give me something. You're kidding me, right? Ali called out from her room. Prince Avalon and the Medusa Witch? It wasn't ringing any bells. I thought everyone knew that story. Ali came out of her room carrying a pile of books, one of which she held open in her hand. She let the pile fall from her arms across the kitchen table, and then slammed down the open book in front of Lynn and Dermot. At the top of the page, written in large letters, was Prince Avalon and the Medusa Witch, apparently a children's story, one of many collected in Ali's book. The evil and ugly Queen Medusa, Ali explained, is a powerful witch who takes Prince Avalon's lover and turns her to stone, keeping her as a statue in the Queen's horrific statue museum. Ali turned the page in her book, and there was a garish illustration of a number of people all turned to stone, displayed as if like trophies in the witch's yard. Everyone in the picture looked frozen in a state of absolute horror. It was a nightmarish image, and not really all that suitable for a children's book. That's it then, Lynn said, scouring the words of the story for any kind of useful details. She wasn't exactly the reading type, and it was all a bunch of gibberish to her. Not that she couldn't read. A gentleman of a distant library had taught her when she was just an orphan. That had been a long time ago, and it was a rarely practiced skill. This is what we need. Sure, Ali agreed, except it's a legend. Pure fiction. Hans Gruber Anthony goes on to write a trilogy about a girl on a mushroom trip. She picked up another book in her pile and began leafing through the pages. How does he cure her? Lynn asked her daughter. Ali shrugged. I think mushrooms just sort of wear off after a while. Lynn rolled her eyes. No, she corrected. Prince Babylon. Abalon? Ali corrected her. He meets a godlike creature in a forest that tells him to collect this strange blue flower. Ali turned the page of the book on the table in front of them, the next page showing an illustration of the blue flower. Lynn thought she might have seen such a flower before, but she couldn't remember where. It had long curved petals like a lily. I think it's only one out. Like a lily, with the seeds protected inside. He uses the petals to concoct a paste he puts on his lips, and then he kisses the princess and she's brought back to life. Creepy, Dermot said, trying to include himself in the conversation. He stood between them at the table, and just kept glancing back and forth as they largely ignored him. What's the name of the flower? Lynn asked, certain she had seen it before somewhere. He never names it, Ali admitted. Some writer, huh? Dermot added in uselessly again. But, Ali added, dropping the book she was holding on top of the children's story. Petrification comes up in this, too. The rudimentary book of spells. Dermot shifted uncomfortably. You have a rudimentary book of spells? He asked with concern. What does it say? Lynn spoke over him. She pointed at the page she had turned it to. It's an enchantment, Ali explained. You can put it on a person or thing, and then everything it touches turns to stone. Everything but glass. Is there a cure? Lynn asked her daughter. No, Ali responded with a shake of her head, and none of the spells I've tried in this book have ever worked. Thank God, Dermot muttered under his breath. But, Ali said, apparently not done, it does mention a blue flower. She pointed out the list of ingredients on the page. Seeds of a blue proselyon. Now, Ali said, tapping her finger on the page. No, tapping her finger on the kitchen table, sorry. Now, I'm not an expert at concoctions or magic, but I believe when it comes to poisons, that the same plants that can kill you can often be used for the cure. It's possible the seeds of this plant, when prepared just right, can induce petrification, and the petals, when ground into paste, cure it. Spell the word petrification, Durbin challenged her. Petrification, Ali listed off without even blinking. Dermot turned to Lynn. We raised a smart kid. Do you even know if that was right? Lynn asked him. No, he admitted, but she'd already turned back to her daughter. Does your book say where we can find this flower? Lynn asked Ali. Blue Proselyon. The name didn't help jog Lynn's memory at all, but she wasn't exactly a flower expert. That was more Dermot's department, and he clearly didn't know of it. No, Ali answered her mother, lifting the book of spells off the children's story underneath. But Hans Gruber said in his story that the blue flower grows under fernillis trees. These little large, thick trunk things with these thorns sprouting out from the branches instead of leaves. She turned the page and pointed to where the writer described the trees. Unfortunately, there wasn't a handy illustration that time. I've seen a forest of such a tree, Lynn said, pretty sure at least, based on her daughter's description. I could be there in 2 days' time. She considered what she'd need to pack and take with her. She'd want to stay light, but... I'll need your books, she said, nodding to the two Ali had shown them. I want to go over these stories myself. When she had time to take her time with it, maybe say some of the words out loud, it made it easier. My books don't go anywhere without me, Ali told her mom, crossing her arms as the narrator took a drink of water. Delicious. All right, Lynn said, not about to argue with her. Then we leave at noon tomorrow. Ali grabbed her books from the table in shock as Lynn grabbed a rag and wiped the surface down. Start packing. Make it worse somehow. The water is making me more thirsty. I've been cursed. All right, start packing. I'm going to make us some dinner. Ali left the table, carrying her books back to her room, while Lynn left to the kitchen to get the tools she'd need to start preparing the deer. That left Dermot at the table, mouth agape in sheer confusion. What? He called after them, but the two women just ignored him. What the fuck just happened? Scene change. Scene change. The meal was delicious, and Ronan was convinced venison was his old-time favorite meat. They had such a warm dinner, sharing stories and poking fun at each other, that none of them noticed the sun go down until the meal was through. As everyone got up, the women running off to pack for their trip tomorrow, Dermot got to work cleaning the table, and Ronan took a plate of his leftovers outside. The sky was a beautiful mess of stars, some large, some small, and some shining brighter than others. Ronan would often spend his time outside at night just watching the stars go by. It was his favorite pastime, and now he had someone to share it with. I brought you some dinner, Ronan called out into the darkness at his uncle on the lawn. Crossing the grass, Ronan sat down in his uncle's lap, balancing his plate on his knees. Sorry I ate all the meat, he apologized. It was really good. But I brought you a bunch of carrots and beans. He grabbed a carrot from his plate and tried to stuff it in his uncle's mouth. Yum, 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 he said. He made the eating sound effects and then took a bite himself. Uh-huh. Carrots are all right, I guess. You can have all the beans, though. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Marius had grown up in the royal city of Dunkel. There were places in the city that felt like home to him, even though to others they would seem nightmarish. The Netherhold was not one of those places. Draxia's fortress was pitch black amongst the swirling, wisping purple magics that kept the city afloat. It was tall, with jutting spires and covered in teeth-like spikes. The grounds surrounding the fortress were planted with flowers, but they were a trap to anyone who tried to pick one. The black metals were razor sharp and hard like metal. Marius chose to wait in her front hall, the large doors shutting behind him. Marius gazed up at the ceiling, many stories above him, and the winding staircase leading to the torture rooms upstairs. The railing, like the flowers outside, was razor sharp to the touch, and from the rooms upstairs came a scream. Draxia! Marius wasn't sure if the scream was one of agony or ecstasy. Maybe both. Marius refused to touch anything, even the floor. He hovered there, silent and still, incorporeal in his shadow form. There was one nice thing about Draxia's fortress, the Netherhold. It was dark, and Marius thrived in the darkness. No, he was the darkness. You seem hesitant to approach, Marius, came a voice from the large door under the stairs in the throne room beyond. Marius drifted through the doors into the large, barren, and dark black throne room. There were only 2 torches in the whole room, on opposite walls, and the light they cast was most insufficient. But it was enough for Marius to make out Draxia's throne at the top of a number of stone steps. It resembled something of a praying mantis, with the back bulging out like 2 black eyes, and the armrests sharp like a mantis's menacing claws. It must have been most uncomfortable to sit in, and yet sit in it Draxia did. I thought you might be preoccupied, Marius told her as politely as he could. He had to be careful with the words he chose. Any wrong thing could set her off, even some right ones. I didn't want to interrupt. Draxia was perched casually on her throne, decked all in black, with tall black stockings all the way up her skinny legs. Her boots were leather, with abnormally high heels, and she had a matching black leather miniskirt. And a muscular and nude slave had his face buried under Draxia's miniskirt, going to town on her clitoris, as she calmly acknowledged Marius's presence. She hardly seemed at all excited about the whole thing, or really anything. You sure I can't come back later? Marius asked, slowly allowing his shadow form to collect and solidify. Nonsense, Draxia muttered with a shrug. I could use some cheering up. She leaned forward and rested her chin on her fist and her elbow on her slave's back. You did get it, didn't you? Marius reached into the pockets of his shadow coat, into the shadow void dimension that he pulled his power from, and from that dimension he produced the glowing vial he had taken from Goldak. The Medusa poison. Oh, I'm sorry. The Medusa potion, he asked, allowing its glow to illuminate the shadows of the room. Draxia leaned back in her seat, away from the light, but with a large smile growing on her face. It's beautiful, isn't it? She muttered, the slave in her lap continuing to lick away as if his life depended on it, and it probably did. And Goldak? She asked as Marius noticed a third person in the room. A very old man was stepping forward from the corner, adorned in a tuxedo of spikes, including a spiked bow tie. Marius tried to ignore this third person and answer the demonatrix's question. Dead, he spoke of his once business partner. I think you'd find his end most poetic. He wasn't sure why exactly Draxia had sent him to kill Goldak, as opposed to killing the merchant herself. Perhaps she knew that Marius had sort of viewed Goldak as a friend, or at least the closest thing he had to a friend, and Draxia loved to torture him. Draxia just loved to torture. This is my butler, Usher. Draxia said of the man in the tuxedo, now stretching his hand out to Marius. You can hand it to him. I take it myself, but I am, as you say, preoccupied. Hello, the butler said as he took the potion vial from Marius. Careful with that, Marius warned the old man. He walked with a limp, hunched and disfigured. Nice bow tie. Bow ties are cool, Usher said. Are they? Marius asked rhetorically. The butler stared deep into the glowing vial. It's astounding, he said in awe. Time is fleeting. No, he didn't say that. Forgive Usher, Draxia said with a wave of her hand. He used to be a royal himself, you know, until I decided on a whim to torch his kingdom, slaughter his army, torture and kill his children, and take him as my prisoner. Draxia smiled at the memories. Marius glanced back to the old man and almost wanted to apologize. But showing weakness in front of Draxia was never a good idea. I was going to torture him until I got off, Draxia continued on casually, and then off with his head, you know what I mean. But then he just kept begging for mercy. And you know what? No. Nope, wrong voice. No. They're so similar. No, Marius said, though he was pretty sure he did. I felt merciful, so I granted him mercy, she explained. Can you believe that? I decided to spare his life. Me. I simply cut off his dick and balls, broke every bone in his body, bound him up in such a way so that they would all re-heal wrong, and now he's forever my loyal gimp until I give him permission to die. Just wanted to point out that the word gimp is offensive and you should never use that word. She's a villain, so I'm giving her permission only because she's evil. Anyway, on with the story. Always benevolent, my queen. Usher groveled, obvious strain in his voice from what must have been chronic agony. So, we're back at we're square now, right? Marius asked, wanting to get out of there as soon as possible. I brought it back and dealt justice in your name. She simply smiled, watching him. I've handed over your potion, Marius insisted loudly, his voice echoing around the room. Now you'll leave me alone. Sorry, again I get that wrong. Now you'll leave... Water break. Kleenex break. All right. I've handed over your potion. Now you'll let me leave through those doors, and we can both forget this unfortunate scenario ever occurred. Draxia nodded in partial agreement. You've done well, Marius, she said darkly, but I'm far from satisfied. Addressing the slave in her lap, she commanded forcefully, Penetrate me now. Getting up from underneath her skirt, Marius finally making out the slave's short blonde hair, the slave leaned forward to embrace Draxia and thrust himself inside of her. He thrust into her again and again, forcefully and with little care, but any discomfort he was causing her only seemed to pleasure her more. Draxia let off a groan of ecstasy, for a moment losing herself and what she was saying. Opening her eyes and staring over her slave's shoulder down to Marius, she finally frowned and continued. As she spoke, her limbs wound the way around her slave, thrusting him into her only even harder and faster. My agents tell me he has a family that yet live. She spoke past her slave to Marius. Others that have his traitor's blood flowing through their veins. They live in a village nearby. You want me to kill them? Marius asked. For you? People who have done nothing. I kind of lost that voice there. You want me to kill them? For you? Marius asked. People who haven't done anything. Draxia nodded, seeming at the point of climax, her hand snaking up her slave's neck, and her fingers tangling in his hair. Yes, she answered Marius, her voice wild with passion. That's it, exactly. Her grip on his head tightened, and for a split second the slave seemed to try to push away from her, but then she snapped his neck cleanly with a simple twist, and climaxed on his now dead cock, as his body then dropped from her embrace to collapse on the floor. Draxia stood up, stepping forward, her boot literally going through her dead slave's stomach, his fluids bursting forth from the wound to ooze down the steps towards Marius. You'll kill everyone related to Goldak, Draxia ranted in a state of excited hysteria. And everyone they've ever met, and the whole fucking town, too. She took a deep breath. That's what we do, she concluded, turning away from him to sit back on her throne. And maybe by the time you're finished with that, I'll have decided whether or not to be merciful and let you live. He had, after all, been the one to introduce her to Goldak. Next time on Royalty at www.patreon.com/99geek in June 2021. For Chapter 2, Lynn and Ali set off on an adventure to try and save Uncle Goldak from his petrification. Meanwhile, Durman addresses the village leaders and tries to convince them of the coming threats of the royals. The coming threat. Let me just try this whole thing again. All right. Lynn and Allie set off on an adventure to try and save Uncle Goldak from his petrification. Meanwhile, Dermot addresses the village leaders and tries to convince them of the coming threat of the royals, a threat they seem reluctant to take seriously. And Marius continues to grapple with having to follow orders he doesn't morally want to follow. Next month on at www.patreon.com/99geek in April 2021. I just changed that to 99geek.ca. Next time. For the first chapter of this new crossover story that I haven't written yet or titled. A crossover story where characters from my other books are brought into the distant future where the princess of a far advanced civilization, one that lives in a solar system-sized megastructure around a Dyson Sphere, needs help defeating her twisted, power-hungry brother. And that's like all I've got so far, but hopefully it's going to be good. We'll see. Only time will tell. In the meanwhile, remember that you can check out more of my stuff at 99geek.ca. And in fact, I usually have a thing that I read, so I'm going to read that. Here I go. My name is Andrew Geczy, and my brand is 99% Geek, found at 99geek.ca. I'm a writer writing monthly chapters of novels like episodes of TV shows, releasing them in 4 weekly segments, a teaser and 3 acts on Sundays on my Patreon page. Every month it's a different book, over a range of genres, and they sometimes even cross over and connect. At the end of the month, the finished chapter is added to the PDFs attached at the bottom of every post. Finally, the finished books are self-published on Amazon. Excuse me. Got a thing in my throat this morning. Sorry. There's a dark fantasy story about a post-apocalyptic world where powerful royals rule and enslave over the remaining peoples, struggling to survive on the last remaining landmass. There's also a sci-fi story about a people on a dying world who have built a ship to a new one, but their project is almost brought down by a terrorist organization within their own ranks. Finally, there's a crossover story where characters from my other books are brought into the distant future, where the princess of a far advanced civilization, one that lives in a solar system-sized megastructure around a Dyson Sphere, needs help defeating her twisted, power-hungry brother. And all these stories will be outside the paywall for all to enjoy as new episodes release weekly, and the finished chapters will be attached to the bottom of every post on the site in convenient PDF format readable on computers, tablets, ebook readers, and phones at the end of the month. But that's not all my stories. There's also urban fantasy tales about a teenage girl turned into a vampire against her will, or a scorned lover investigating paranormal phenomena, or a journalist covering news and politics in the Middle East. And there's a fantasy story about a fallen angel trying to stop the end of the world. All these stories are published and available on Amazon, and are also safe and sound behind the paywall in PDF format attached to an archive at the top of my Patreon page. It's only viewable by subscribers. My entire library of work, thousands of pages worth, is easily accessible to every subscriber at any level. And speaking of which, I meant to say this in the Geekly Weekly, but I had to rush through it because I had a delivery. I didn't want to make the delivery guy wait. It's my drug dealer. I didn't want to make my drug dealer wait. Jeez, he's my friend. But I did want to point out last time and kind of didn't really get into it that the podcast, the yearly subscription that I have to my podcast host that lets me upload my audio podcast kind of ran out again, and they wanted to charge me $600 again. And of course, I don't have $600. And at first, they're like, "Don't worry, we'll show you mercy again." I'm like, "That's really nice of you guys. I appreciate." No, actually, what the words it says, "Don't worry, you can enjoy your free account for another year," or something like that. I was like, "Oh wow, that's really nice of you." But then the day came and went, and when they said enjoy my free account, they meant they would downgrade me and take away all my storage and bandwidth and everything. So suddenly my podcast was inaccessible for a couple days, and that was horrible. And I talked to them, and we sorted things out. Now I'm paying $10 a month, or was it $20 a month? No, I think it was $20 a month. I'm paying $20 a month now, and now I can at least host half of my archive. So the backlog, there's no longer as much of a backlog, just I can fit so many episodes at a time. and I'm only going to do 5 of the Geekly Weeklies, so they're always bigger. If you want to read some of my older stories that you can no longer access on the podcast, you can always just go to 99geek.ca and check out my stories there, as we've been discussing here. Anyway, reading a bit more water before I continue. Drinking a bit more water, sorry, before I continue reading. There's even a Geekly Weekly blog which covers all the news you may have missed over the week, as well as ranks a week's worth of television and makes predictions on what new pop culture things might be in the public consciousness for the next week. Finally, I do video game streams, both multiplayer matchmaking as well as single-player campaign playthroughs. You can see me play games like Final Fantasy, Call of Duty, Hitman, and more. And you can see it all in one place. So stay tuned, and maybe subscribe. It's only $1, and the support you show will go a very long way, I promise. There are also higher tiers. Give $5 one month and you can name a character, or a location, or suggest a thing you might want to see. Basically, you get to give a noun, and then I promise to incorporate that noun into one of my stories somehow. Maybe not the same month you give the suggestion, but within 3 months guaranteed. No matter how crazy, you can't sabotage me. I promise. Think of it like a fun improv game, and you can keep giving nouns for every month you pay at the $5 tier. Or if you give $10, you don't get 2 nouns, but you can give a description to go with your noun. Describe the personality of your character, or the look of your location, or the importance of your item. For $10, you get a noun and a description. You can also give $1 towards supporting my efforts at video game streaming or my weekly blog if that's where your interests lie. I'm as poor as it gets, living paycheck to paycheck and sometimes starving, so I understand if you are too. I don't want to take food out of your mouths. In fact, I'm starving kind of right now. And I am out of pizza. I had leftover pizza the past couple days. But I do have like a bunch of chicken in my freezer, like chicken nuggets and things. So I'll make some chicken and eat chicken for breakfast, I guess. Don't really have much other choices. Anyway, I'm as poor as it gets, living paycheck to paycheck and sometimes starving, so I understand if you are too. I don't want to take food out of your mouth, so your attention is enough. Say something, so comment here, or at the very least, follow me on Twitter at Andrew Geczy, or Instagram at WingCommander4. Live long and prosper, may the force be with you. Long live Marceline the Vampire Queen. We are the 99% Geek. Where's the pause button? Here it is. Goodbye.